The scream cut through the forest like a blade, sharp, desperate, human. It echoed once, then again, bouncing between the trunks and dissolving into the mist that clung low to the ground. The ranger stopped mid-step, one hand still resting on the strap of his radio, his breath catching as his training kicked in. Screams like that were never ignored. Not here. Not ever. He turned toward the sound and started running. Branches snapped beneath his boots as he pushed deeper into the woods, the beam of his flashlight jerking wildly with each stride. The forest at night was a living thing, full of whispers and movement, but the scream had cut through all of it, silencing the insects and the distant calls of owls. That silence followed him now, heavy and unnatural, pressing in as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. He called out as he ran, announcing himself, his voice loud and steady, the way he had been trained to keep panicked people grounded. There was no answer, only the memory of the scream replaying in his head. He slowed as the trees thinned slightly, the ground dipping into a small clearing choked with fog. His light swept across rocks, ferns, and fallen branches, then froze. Someone was standing there. A woman, alone. She was positioned between two tall pines, her back partially turned toward him, her silhouette thin and rigid against the pale haze. For a brief moment, relief washed over him. He had found her. She was alive. He took a step forward and raised his voice again, telling her she was safe now, that help had arrived. She didn't move. He took another step, then another. Something about the way she stood began to bother him. Her shoulders were too high, drawn up toward her ears as if held there by tension that never released. Her head was tilted slightly to one side, not in fear or confusion, but in a way that felt deliberate, almost curious. The fog swirled around her ankles, yet she remained perfectly still, unaffected by the cold night air that had already soaked through the ranger's uniform. He realized then that he could no longer hear his own footsteps. The forest had gone completely silent. No wind, no insects, no distant animals, just the faint hum of blood rushing in his ears. His instincts, sharpened by years in the wilderness, screamed at him to stop. He did. His body froze where it stood, muscles locking as if some unseen hand had reached inside him and pulled tight. He had been in dangerous situations before, lost hikers, injured animals, sudden storms, but this felt different. This felt wrong in a way he couldn't immediately explain. He called out to the woman again, softer this time. Asked if she was hurt, asked if she could hear him. Slowly she began to turn. The movement was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill straight through him. She didn't turn the way people normally did, with a shift of weight or a step of the feet. Her body remained facing the trees as her head rotated toward him, stopping just short of what should have been possible. Her face came into view, pale and slack, her eyes wide but unfocused, staring past him rather than at him. Her mouth was slightly open, lips parted as if she were about to speak. But no sound came out. The ranger felt his stomach drop. He realized then that the screams he had heard did not match the woman standing before him. The voice had been louder, stronger, filled with panic. This woman looked drained, hollowed out, like a shell left behind. He noticed her hands next, hanging at her sides, fingers curled inward at strange angles, trembling not with fear but with effort, as though holding something back. "Ma'am," he said, forcing the word out, "are you injured?" Her lips moved, slowly, carefully. She took a breath that sounded wrong, too deep, too controlled, and then she screamed again. The sound was identical to the first, same pitch, same desperation, same raw terror, but it came from a mouth that barely moved, from a body that didn't react to its own noise. The scream echoed through the clearing and faded, and when it was gone, the silence slammed back into place. The ranger felt nausea rise in his throat. Understanding crept in, cold and heavy. The scream was not a call for help, it was bait. He took a step back without meaning to, his heel catching on a root. The woman's head tilted further, her eyes finally focusing on him, locking onto his face with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. Awareness. Recognition. The corners of her mouth twitched upward, not into a smile but into something that mimicked one poorly, as if she were copying a human expression without fully understanding it. From the darkness behind her, deeper between the trees, something shifted. The ranger didn't see it clearly at first, just movement, a distortion in the shadows, tall and thin, sliding from one trunk to the next. The woman remained still, but her breathing grew louder, harsher, as if she were struggling to keep control. The ranger's training told him to run, to create distance, to get out of the kill zone. His body refused to respond. Every instinct he had was screaming danger, yet fear had pinned him in place. The thing behind her moved again, closer this time. The fog parted around it unnaturally, curling away as if repelled. The ranger's hand tightened around his flashlight until his knuckles ached. He understood now why the forest had gone silent, why no animals stirred, why the woman hadn't run. She had already been caught. The woman's mouth opened once more, and for a terrifying second he thought another scream was coming. Instead, her voice dropped low, flat, and emotionless. She spoke his name, not shouted, not guessed, spoke it with certainty. The sound of it sent a wave of dread through him that no amount of experience could suppress. He had never told her who he was. He had never met her. Behind her, the darkness leaned forward, and the ranger finally understood that whatever had been calling for help in these woods had never needed saving at all. The ranger forced his legs to move. It wasn't a clean step or a controlled retreat, more like his body breaking free from invisible restraints all at once. He staggered backward, boots scraping against damp soil, eyes never leaving the woman's face. She didn't follow. She didn't need to. Her purpose, he realized, was already fulfilled. The thing behind her shifted again, and this time the ranger saw enough to know he didn't want to see more. It was tall, far taller than any human, and impossibly thin, its shape suggested rather than defined. The darkness clung to it as if it were part of the creature itself, bending and stretching around long limbs that moved with slow, deliberate confidence. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. The ranger understood, in a sudden and horrifying clarity, that running would only make the game more interesting. He raised his flashlight, the beam shaking as it cut through the fog and brushed against the shape between the trees. The light didn't reveal details so much as confirm absence. No clear face, no recognizable features, just a suggestion of a head where a head should be, angled downward as if observing him with interest. The beam flickered, dimmed, then steadied again, and the ranger felt a wave of unease at the thought that the thing might be reacting to the light rather than avoiding it. The woman finally moved. Her body turned slowly now, joints cracking softly as if unused for a long time. When she faced him fully, he saw that her clothes were torn and dirty, streaked with dried mud and dark stains he didn't want to identify. Her eyes never blinked. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven motions, like she was borrowing breath rather than producing it herself. "Please," she said, and this time the word sounded wrong. Not panicked, not desperate, practiced. "Help me." The ranger swallowed hard. Every instinct told him not to answer, not to engage, but training overrode fear. He asked her to step toward him, to come closer to the light. The moment the words left his mouth, he knew it was a mistake. Her lips curved again into that same broken imitation of a smile, and behind her, the tall shape leaned closer, as if listening. She took a step. The sound of her foot touching the ground echoed unnaturally loud in the clearing. The ranger took another step back, then another, until his shoulders brushed against the rough bark of a tree. His radio crackled at his chest, sudden static hissing through the speaker. Relief surged through him, then died just as quickly when he realized the sound wasn't forming words, just noise, interference, like something nearby was drowning out the signal. The woman stopped a few feet away from him. Up close, the wrongness was impossible to ignore. Her skin looked stretched too tight across her face, as if pulled over a shape that didn't quite match. Her eyes tracked him with mechanical precision, following every small movement. She tilted her head again, mirroring the creature behind her, and for the first time, the ranger noticed how closely their movements matched. They were connected. A sudden memory surfaced in his mind, an old report from years ago dismissed as hysteria. hikers who followed voices into the woods, search teams that found footprints leading deep into the forest, only to stop abruptly. No signs of struggle, no bodies, just silence. At the time, he had chalked it up to panic, to people getting lost and disoriented. Standing there now, with the air thick and unmoving around him, he understood how wrong he had been. The woman took another step, and this time the creature moved with her, gliding forward from the trees. The ranger felt his stomach churn. The thing was closer now, close enough that the darkness around it seemed to bleed into the clearing, dimming the light, dulling the colors of the world. The forest no longer felt like a place. It felt like a trap that had finally closed. He turned and ran. Branches tore at his arms as he crashed through the undergrowth, flashlight bouncing wildly, breath burning in his chest. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Every fiber of his being told him that if he did, if he gave whatever was behind him the attention it wanted, he wouldn't be able to move again. The ground sloped downward, slick with fallen leaves, and he nearly lost his footing more than once, barely catching himself before falling. The silence followed him. No pounding footsteps, no crashing pursuit, just the steady sound of his own breathing and the frantic thud of his heart. That scared him more than anything else. Predators chased, hunters pursued. Whatever this was, did neither. It waited. It let its prey exhaust itself, let fear do the work. The ranger burst into another clearing and skidded to a stop, spinning around, flashlight raised. Nothing. Trees. Fog. Empty space. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe he had lost them. Maybe distance and speed had saved him. Then the radio crackled again. This time a voice came through. "Help me," it said. Perfectly clear, perfectly human. The same voice as before. The same scream, softened into a plea. It came not from the speaker, but from somewhere behind him, deep in the woods he had just fled. The ranger's hands shook as he reached up and tore the radio from his chest, throwing it to the ground. The voice didn't stop. It didn't need the device. The forest itself had become the speaker. He backed away slowly, scanning the trees, every shadow a potential threat. His flashlight beam caught movement to his left, a familiar figure standing just beyond the fog. The woman, unharmed, unhurried, waiting. Behind her, towering silently, the darkness shifted once more. The ranger realized then that the trap hadn't failed. It had simply reset. The ranger's breath came in shallow bursts as he backed away, his heels sinking into soft earth. His eyes flicked from tree to tree, searching for an escape that didn't involve turning his back on what was watching him. The woman stood motionless at the edge of the fog, her outline blurring as mist curled around her legs. She looked almost peaceful now, as if the screaming had never happened, as if she was simply waiting for someone to make the next mistake. He forced himself to think. Panic would get him killed faster than anything else. He reached for his training, for procedures drilled into him over years of night patrols and emergency situations. Distance, light, noise. He swept the flashlight across the clearing in slow, deliberate arcs, illuminating trunks, rocks, patches of disturbed ground. Nothing rushed him, nothing reacted. The forest absorbed the light and gave nothing back. "Stay where you are," he said, not sure who he was speaking to anymore. The woman. The thing behind her. Himself. She obeyed. That compliance unsettled him more than aggression would have. Predators tested boundaries. They provoked. This thing allowed him the illusion of control. The woman's eyes remained fixed on him, unblinking, her head tilted as if listening to something he couldn't hear. Then very slowly she raised one hand and pointed past him, deeper into the trees. "There," she said softly. "It's safe there." The ranger felt a surge of anger cut through his fear. The manipulation was obvious now, crude and calculated. He shook his head, backing away further until his shoulders brushed against another tree. He considered climbing, then dismissed the idea instantly. Height would not protect him from something that moved through darkness like water. A sound rippled through the forest, a low resonant hum that vibrated through the ground rather than the air. The ranger felt it in his bones, a pressure behind his eyes that made it hard to focus. The woman lowered her arm, her fingers twitching as if pulled by invisible strings. Behind her, the darkness stretched upward, unfolding itself taller, broader, as if shedding a constraint. The ranger understood then that the thing was growing impatient. He turned sharply and ran again, choosing direction at random, trusting instinct over reason. He pushed through thorns and ferns, ignoring the pain as they tore at his skin. The beam of his flashlight caught a flash of orange ahead, a trail marker. Relief hit him so hard his vision blurred. He followed it, heart hammering, boots pounding against packed earth as the trees thinned and the trail opened up. The hum followed. Not louder, not closer, just present. Constant, like a reminder that distance meant nothing. The ranger stumbled onto the trail fully and slowed, forcing himself not to collapse. Trails meant other people, roads, radios that worked. He turned to look back. The trail behind him was empty. No woman, no towering shadow, no fog, just trees standing quietly under the night sky. For a long moment, he stood there, listening. Slowly, painfully, the sounds of the forest returned. Insects chirped, leaves rustled. An owl called out somewhere far off. The hum faded until it was gone entirely. He laughed once, a sharp, broken sound. Adrenaline drained from his system, leaving his legs weak. He told himself it was over, that whatever he had encountered couldn't cross onto the trail, that rules existed, boundaries he didn't understand but could rely on. Then he noticed the footprints. They lined the trail behind him, pressed deep into the dirt. Bare feet, human-shaped but wrong in subtle ways. Too long, the toes uneven, the stride unnaturally wide. They didn't lead away from the clearing. They led toward him. His radio crackled softly on the ground somewhere back in the woods, and though he couldn't hear words anymore, he felt the intent behind the sound. The ranger stepped backward, slowly, carefully, until his heel caught the edge of the trail marker post. From the trees ahead, the woman emerged. She stepped onto the trail without hesitation, her bare feet making no sound at all. Her face looked more alive now, color returning to her cheeks, her eyes bright and alert. She smiled properly this time, wide and convincing. Behind her, just beyond the tree line, the darkness waited, no longer bothering to hide its shape. The ranger realized with sinking certainty that the trail had never been a boundary. It had been a funnel. The ranger's legs felt heavy as stone, but he forced himself to move, stepping off the trail and into the shallow brush to his right. He kept his eyes on the woman, on the way she stood now with an ease that hadn't been there before, her shoulders relaxed, her posture natural. Whatever fear she had once carried was gone. Whatever had replaced it wore her body well. "You don't need to run anymore," she said. Her voice was calm, almost kind. "It already knows you." The ranger's grip tightened around the flashlight, his thumb hovering over the switch as if turning it off might somehow make him less visible. He realized then that the light had become irrelevant. The thing in the trees was not tracking him by sight. It had never been about sight. It had been about attention, about response, about instinctively moving toward a cry for help. He took another step back and felt the ground change beneath his boot. Mud. Soft. Recently disturbed. His stomach sank as he looked down and saw more footprints, layered over each other, circling the trail in widening loops. Not wandering, positioning. The woman tilted her head, studying him. "You were fast," she said. "It likes that." Anger flared again, sharp enough to cut through the paralysis. He raised his voice, shouting into the woods, into the darkness, daring it to come closer. The sound echoed weakly and died. Nothing rushed him. Nothing reacted. The woman only smiled wider. Behind her, the darkness began to move. It stepped forward, not lunging, not stalking, but unfolding itself from the trees as if it had always been there and was simply deciding to be noticed. The ranger finally saw enough to understand why his mind had resisted forming a clear image before. The shape was wrong in too many ways at once. Limbs bent where they shouldn't. Its height shifted subtly as it moved, never consistent, never stable. Where a face should have been, there was only a suggestion of depth, like looking into a hollow space that swallowed the light. The air grew heavy again. the familiar pressure settling over him, squeezing his chest, slowing his thoughts. He felt the urge to drop the flashlight, to lower his gaze, to stop resisting. The sensation was almost comforting, like sinking into warm water after a long day. He recognized the danger in that feeling immediately. With a roar of effort, he turned and ran one last time. He didn't choose a direction, he didn't think. He sprinted blindly through the trees, branches slashing his face, his lungs screaming. The hum surged behind him, stronger now, vibrating through his spine. He could feel it matching his pace effortlessly, feel the forest bending around it to clear a path. Then, suddenly, the ground vanished beneath his feet. He fell hard, tumbling down a short embankment and landing in shallow water. Pain exploded through his shoulder as he hit, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. He lay there gasping, the cold stream soaking through his uniform, shock anchoring him to the ground. The hum stopped. The forest sounds rushed back in all at once, overwhelming in their normalcy. Frogs croaked, water trickled over stones, leaves rustled gently overhead. The ranger pushed himself up, wincing, and scanned the embankment above him. Nothing. No woman. No towering darkness. No footprints at the edge, just trees and earth and night. He waited, barely daring to breathe, counting seconds, then minutes. When nothing happened, he climbed shakily out of the stream and forced himself to keep moving, following the water downhill until he saw the faint glow of lights through the trees. He reached the ranger station just before dawn. They found him hours later sitting on the steps, soaked, shaking, unable to explain what had happened in any way that made sense. Search teams went out that morning. They found no woman, no signs of a struggle, no unusual tracks. The clearing he described didn't exist on any map. In the days that followed, the ranger filed his report and requested a transfer. He avoided night patrols, avoided the deeper sections of the forest. He told himself it was over, that he had escaped. But sometimes when the wind is right and the forest is quiet, new rangers swear they hear screaming deep among the trees. A woman's voice, desperate, human. And somewhere in the darkness something waits, patient as ever, for someone else who still believes every cry for help needs an answer.